And tonight we're asking, what will the end game look like in Syria? The international community is now more or less agreed that the regime of Bashar al-Assad is finished. What's not certain is how long that regime can last. Will it be sanctions, a military intervention, or an armed uprising that brings change? Until then, every day brings new reports of brutal repression, and the protesters themselves are becoming more violent as well. In cities like Homs, some are calling it an all-out civil war. So tonight we ask, what next for Syria? Let's introduce you to the guests. Osama Edward is here with me in the studio. He's a member of Syria's main opposition, the Syrian National Council. In Cairo tonight, where the Arab League is meeting to discuss possible sanctions against Syria, is Haitham Maleh, a Syrian human rights activist. In London, we're joined by Jonathan Paris, a Middle East analyst at the Atlantic Council of the United States. And later in the programme, we'll also be hearing from our correspondent in Moscow to hear about the Russian position in the international community as well. Well, before we hear from our panel, let's take a look at this report on the situation in Homs, Syria's third largest city, and the options which are currently being weighed up by world powers as they seek to end the bloodshed. Bloodshed the UN says has claimed the lives of thousands.
In the center of Homs, what appears to be an ambulance in flames. That's according to anti-regime activists who posted this video on the internet. A video, like so many others coming from Syria, impossible to verify. Tanks are still on the streets and violence in Syria continues unabated. For the population of this key center of opposition, located northeast of Damascus, everyday life is getting harder and harder. The army is preventing supplies, particularly fuel, from getting through, leading to long lines.
We have no petrol because of the siege. We have no more fuel, no more telephone. But we are continuing to protest and fight for our freedom.
A fight that the president of the opposition Syrian National Council brought to Paris on Wednesday, where he met French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé. Juppé ruled out any military intervention, but he did mention the possibility of humanitarian action.
Whether we should create humanitarian corridors or humanitarian zones is something that we will examine in our official business at our next EU meeting.
Juppé broached the issue during a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. The move indicates a hardening of France's position regarding Syria. Turkey is willing to take it a step further. Officials say they could set up a sanctuary on Syrian territory if huge numbers of refugees head for the frontier, an idea that has already been raised when 10,000 refugees crossed the border between Turkey and Syria in July. But for now, this proposal has generated little enthusiasm in the West.
All right, well, let's get to tonight's discussions. Osama Edward, I'd like to start with you, if I may. You're a member of the main opposition movement, the Syrian National Council. Now, when we look at what's going on in Homs, obviously it's central to the resistance movement, but some are now saying it's a civil war. Is that something you'd agree with?
I don't agree with that. I think what's going on in Homs is a real revolution. It is a real struggle against a dictator. It's a real revolution to demand freedom and democracy. What's going on in Homs city and other places in Syria is a real struggle led by peaceful demonstrators to reach that Syria of the future that we are demanding and we are dreaming of. The regime has, from the beginning, from the start of the revolution since March 15th, tried its best to push the revolution and the people, the peaceful demonstrators on the streets, to push them toward carrying weapon and, you know, trying to make this revolution, this peaceful revolution, as much as using arms and violent as it can. But sometimes we can see like it succeeded to do that, but in general, no, it didn't, because the demonstrators on the streets are really very aware of what's going on, what's the regime planning. This point was very planned by the regime to push the demonstrators towards carrying weapons. And the other point is, and I want to talk about it especially in Homs, was to push the struggle there towards sectarian struggle. And that
right, because that's the concern, isn't it? Because you've got Sunnis, you've got Shias, you've got
exactly.
the minority
Christians,
Alawites. There are reports that they're all fighting each other and that this is becoming increasingly volatile. You dispute that?
That's not truth. That's not true. This is not a truth. What we see in Homs, what we call our friends there, our colleagues there, that's not the truth. The regime is trying its best to make it like that. But the peaceful demonstrators, our great peaceful demonstrators in Homs, we call it now the capital of freedom in Syria, the capital of the revolution in Syria. No, they have said to the regime, they have said very clearly to the whole world, no, it's not going to be a civil war, a sectarian war in Syria. No,
all right,
it's not like that.
Let's go now to Haitham Maleh, who's in Cairo, where the Arab League is, of course, meeting tonight to discuss the possibility of sanctions against the regime in Syria. We'll talk about what they're doing in a moment. But, you know, the official death toll now close to 4,000. You've got thousands of people missing, children now being killed, we're hearing as well. It's very difficult for this regime to keep defending itself, isn't it? But defending themselves they do.
In general, I think the regime is going to fall down soon because the revolution is continuing. They break the field war, and there is no field fear more than before. Now the Council of Military who support who they left the army, there are thousands of military. They try to protect the civilian. So now, and in the other hand, the decisions from the Arab League in Cairo, it's very important. They give the regime of Bashar Assad final speech. If he do not stop the bloodshed, he do not pull out the military from the streets, from the tanks and everything, they will punish him, and they make a very important step for the punishment for the regime for a near future. They give him only for tomorrow at 1 afternoon. The last time, if the regime will not sign on the protocol, so they will take this very important step to punish the regime, and then this step will send, I mean, the report or what the decision of the Arab League will send to the United Nations, to the Security Council, to take another step against the regime. This is very important.
Let's keep absolutely. Let's and I want to talk about that in more detail in a moment. But I want to keep the focus on the humanitarian situation for the time being, because Jonathan Paris, the French have come up with a plan, haven't they? That they put about yesterday. They're talking about humanitarian convoys going into Syria. It's unclear how exactly that would work. What's your view on that plan? Is it feasible at all?
I'm not sure. I need to know more details about it. I mean, clearly it's an easier step to take than, say, a no-fly zone, because, you know, a no-fly zone would require substantial military action to enforce it, you know, to keep the other side from interfering in the airspace. So it may be a good initial first step, and I think the French Prime Minister is saying the right things. He's moving in the right direction, and once again, I think France is leading the way here, leading the pack of the otherwise very reticent international community in the face of, as you describe, horrible humanitarian situation in Syria right now.
Right, and it's all sounding quite familiar, isn't it? Because, you know, the Arab League taking action and then the French calling for some kind of intervention. This is all taking us back, isn't it, to what happened before the intervention in Libya?
Yes, there are similarities. You're quite right. The big difference is Libya, you know, got away with it. They got the UN Security Council resolution with Russia on board. Now there's no way Russia is going to agree to it because they feel in Libya, the mandate was exceeded by the NATO forces against the Gaddafi regime. Now so the Russians won't let that happen again.
Right, and we will hear from our reporter in Russia in the second part of this debate. But if I could just put to you, Osama Edward, there's a bit of a division, isn't there, between the opposition at the moment, because you've got your organisation, the National Council, but also you've got the soldiers who have defected from the army, and they have called quite directly today for airstrikes on strategic targets. Mm-hmm. They don't want troops on the ground, but they do want some assistance from the international community. Is that something that you go along with?
Yeah, but before that, I just want to go back to the point of the humanitarian situation in Syria. I have to say this about Homs and the other places in Hama and Idlib. You know, it's affected areas now. We have to declare that internationally and get some help from international community, because there's no electricity, no food, no water, no clean water there to drink for kids.
And that's what Alan Juppé is calling for, isn't it? To get those supplies into people there.
Exactly. And now we go to the second question, which was, no, I think it's not a very big, like, difference between our positions in the SNC and the Syrian Free Army. What we are calling for is a free, we'll say, safe or no-fly zone at the beginning, to give some space of protection for those defectors who are going to defect from the Syrian.
But in order to enforce a no-fly zone, you will need to drop bombs on strategic targets. That's what in essence is what a no-fly zone is.
You know, that's the issue that we. I mean, I'm not a military analyst. I cannot. Tackle this issue, but I think both no-fly zone and safe haven can encourage those soldiers who don't want to shoot on civilians, who are forced by the regime to shoot on civilians, then to defect and then have some place to be protected there. That's why we need it.
And the other idea that's been put about is Turkey's plan for a humanitarian corridor somewhere that would be safe for civilians to go to, and as you mentioned as well, the soldiers.
You know, all these points are now very, they are discussed widely and very openly. Now people are, my colleagues in the SNC are talking about this, discussing all these issues. There will be a very clear idea about all these points. But we, as Syrian National Council, what we impose on now, we emphasize on now is the Arab League sanctions upon the regime, especially the economical sanctions and diplomatic sanctions. To withdraw the ambassadors, to freeze the assets.
So you'd like the Arab League to get on with it and move a bit more quickly?
I think it will be the next. It will be the next step.
All right. What are your thoughts on that, Haytham Mali? Do you think we could be looking at a no-fly zone, as the Syrian Free Army, as they call themselves, is demanding now?
I think the army who separate from the army regime will support the people in the ground. Will support the civilian. Even they use the weapons, the guns. The revolution will continue go in safety, in peaceful way. But the army found themselves that they have the right to protect the civilians. So this is a very important point. And from our side as opposition, we are look at this point as normal point, and the army who separate from the government army. I mean, because we have 60,000 of the army are under rule of Maher Assad, and those are with the regime 100%. But the rest of the army, about 240,000, they are not. For this, a big quantity of the army are now separated from the army. They build their council, the army council now, and they are fighting against the regime. They are protecting the civilian people. Maybe this scenario will be help for finish this regime. You see that now every day we have a lot of people killed everywhere, more than 25, 30, 40 persons daily. So what's going on? Now the international community has a response about they have to take an important step to stop this bloodshed, and to help to support the people for transfer this regime out of Syria. We want to build our life, our democracy country, and there is no way to make it by ourselves alone. We need help from all sides, from Arabic world, from international world, from international community. And we don't need to see our country destroyed like Libya, for example, but there is several ways in this point. The Arab League can send an army to Syria like what they did in Lebanon before through the civilian war. Also, from the side of international community, they can send some ships opposite of the sea of Syrian Sea.
But it seems if I may interrupt you for a moment, it seems to be that you're calling for military intervention, but without any bombs falling on Syria. That's just not a possibility, is it?
It is not. It is not army intervention, but it is some big ships to make the movement of the regime army very difficult. You know. Even they can make something against the connecting between all the parts of the army or cover Syria by the tanks, by the aeroplane, by the other kind of weapons or radar, for example. So if this ship will not use any kind of weapons, any kinds of bombs, but they can use a kind of electronic movement, electronic things to make this movement of the Syrian army against the revolution is very hard. Like when they did it in the opposite of the Sea of Libya, opposite of beside Sea of Egypt through Israel war with Egypt. They did it before.
Okay.
So it's not need okay. to use pumps or something like this.
All right, we're going to have to take a quick break. Do stay with us. When we come back, we'll have the second part of tonight's debate, and we'll have the international headlines for you as well. Don't go away.